Our guest today is Hanne-Berit Hahnemann. She is known as a hip-hop violinist. I rock the violin, and she does. She has performed with the best, some of whom are the Queen of Denmark, Queen Mother of Denmark, and Prince Henrik of Denmark, not to mention all the huge stars she has chatted with. I am honored to call her friend. Welcome to the show, Hanne-Berit.
Thank you so much, Dr. Joyce. I really appreciate you having me on.
It is my pleasure. It seems like some people are just born to sing or dance. You used to stare at the radio and burst into song and dance. So you received your first violin early and started lessons and went on to play orchestra, solo concerts, and tours throughout Europe. Do you think music can be learned, or do you think people just have to be born to perform?
You know, I think it can be learned, but I do think, because I've seen it happen, I've seen the people who are very, very talented and didn't really go that far, and I've seen the exact opposite. So I think it's a good combination. You have to sacrifice time. There is just not a question about that. That goes for every single person if you want to do something more than just having it as a hobby. But without the natural talent, it's difficult. You know, it's just hard. I think that is a huge bonus, and otherwise it does sound, the music that you make ends up sounding learned instead of felt. And so I think you have to have both.
I think that's a great answer, because I think the natural talent certainly helps you with the rest of it. But if you don't have that natural talent, it's going to be hard for you to acquire it, I would think.
Yeah, and I often think about, you know, what makes a certain person so much better than others. And I think that if they both, you know, are a very disciplined and hardworking person and dedicated people, I think that the person who can express and can catch me with his or her passion and just ability to express, then that's the person I'm going to go with. You know, that's the person I want to listen to.
I really agree with that, because I always tell people passion is behind every success.
Yeah.
You have to be passionate about what it is that you're doing. The violin for you was your saving grace and a gift where you could express yourself. How do you feel self-esteem enters into the picture of success in the music field, or any other field for that matter?
Yeah, in any other field, because it helped me tremendously as a child. I wasn't very happy in school personally and academically for many, many years, and if it hadn't been for the violin, I may not have known what success was. And just kind of, I always knew that I was good at something, and just knowing that what should I say, how success felt, made it easier for me to also feel it and be successful in other areas later on. So it means a lot, and I feel like every child should feel that success at some point, you know, in their childhood. Otherwise, it's going to hamper things later on. I find I've seen it many times with students and my kids' friends and etc. So I feel very very fortunate that I was able to have that to rely on, fall back on.
Yes, I think you must have had some self-esteem, though, even to think that you knew you were going to do it.
Yes, that is true. I mean, I had a lot of support around that, too. You know, I had a lot of support. And so that's true. But I felt almost like I had self-esteem in that one area. I didn't have a lot of self-esteem as a you know, personally, socially, I did not. And even academically. So it was very apart from the rest of my life. There was the music, and then there was the school, and then there were the friends. And, you know, every child wants to be popular, and every child wants to have good friends. And, I mean, that's what you kind of want to do. So that was a little difficult for me. I mean, it was only, you know, lasted only until high school, and then it was fine. But I do remember those years. They were some painful times. And I see other kids going through that, and I kind of, you know, it pains me when I see that they don't have anything outside school, that they're not nurtured that way from family or whatever, you know. So it's important, and I know what you're saying. I mean, I had support in that area. Otherwise, it wouldn't have happened for sure.
And I would say the support makes all the difference. So just having somebody believe in you, tell you can do it, maybe help you get started, mentor you in some way, I would think that support would just make all the difference. If somebody's discouraging you, you're not going to be able to do it. So I think that definitely that you had some great support there. You mentioned that people in the performing arts can be difficult and self-centered. I met you, and you are anything but that. Why do you think people in any industry think they are, quote, unquote, all that?
Well, we're in a dangerous field because it's, my field, performing arts, is all about how do I look, how do I sound, how do I come across, what do people think, it's very easy, once you go public, once you are performing publicly, then people then you're owned, your product is owned, and it doesn't matter by other people, it doesn't matter if it's your expression or whatever it is, and it's often, taken apart, and this wasn't great, this wasn't good, this was good, in the papers and whatever media, you have to kind of get used to that. So it makes you center, everything is centered around you, and some people can handle that, and some people can't. And I was lucky that it's definitely a lot of pressure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think it's not healthy. I don't think.
No, I don't. I agree with you. Well, you are an outspoken proponent of mental health support. So many people need this. People have a physical problem. Oh, the poor thing. But when somebody is suffering inside mentally, there just doesn't seem to be that kind of empathy for them. And so many people need this as they go through life misunderstood and acquire a low self-esteem. Where would you like to see mental health professionals take this to?
Oh, I would just, I wish more than anything that we would actually have a mental health professional in the school. And with that, I mean a guidance counselor who really does the counseling, as opposed to, we have put guidance counselors in the schools, but they don't do counseling because they don't have time. They do administrative work, really. They schedule people's classes and stuff, and then they have a few minutes here and there to take some, emergency or whatever. And I think that it would be so fantastic for students who can't, for example, have support at home and who do not have a happy home life, that they would really be able to have a counselor who has an open door, who doesn't have to open cases, who don't have to open cases for insurance and stuff like that, but really function as a guidance counselor only for counseling. I think that would be just make so many kids so much happier for later on. And mental health, I have a license in mental health counseling and school counseling, and it's just something that I believe in tremendously. And I think it's very misunderstood how important this is, and there's just not enough money allocated to this. Sports coaches are paid so much more than any counselor in any schools, and it should be to me it should be the other way around. But
I think it's a matter of money mostly, but I don't think that they're getting their priorities straight in the schools, because the schools are so busy teaching you things you're going to forget as soon as you learn them, instead of really getting into the core of what's bothering kids. I know I was one of those kids, and I also have a counseling degree, and I work with adults who are still concerned about the lack of the mental health that they got, the mental health help that they needed so badly. Even 30 years ago, they're still talking about it.
Yeah, and we still have a stigma, about going to a real therapist. And we still have I hear people all the time say, oh, I don't have to go, I'm not crazy. And what does crazy even mean anyway these days? I mean, who is even crazy? I mean, everybody needs to go and talk to somebody at some point, where it's completely confidential. Everybody needs that at some point, and I think a lot of people need it a lot, and it's extremely helpful. And I remember thinking, when I grew up in Denmark, and we had no counselors in the schools then, and I know that my life would have been better as a young child, if I'd had someone to go to, because I didn't feel like I could go home and talk to my parents about certain things, and it would have been so helpful to have someone where it was completely confidential and you can get help.
I couldn't agree more. I think that it's a very important missed opportunity for educators not to be able to help these children, because children grow up to be adults. And these adults are just grown-up children who take their issues with them. And if they could be remedied as a child, I think we'd have such a better world. So I'm completely in agreement with you.
Yeah.
Well, Hanne-Berit, you had traveled extensively. When you traveled to Vienna, you broke your left hand. Tell us that story and what it was like to live there. While in Vienna, you were asked to be a soloist with the National Symphony Orchestra, but you turned it down and instead decided to pursue a master's degree in the U.S. I know I asked you several questions there, so try to answer and tell us about your experiences.
Okay, well, Vienna, I lived in Vienna for 6 years. I was at the Conservatory of Music there. It was an incredible experience, very different place that I've ever lived, really, because I would say that the U.S. and Denmark were closer in style socially and politically than Austria is to Denmark, actually. So it was very different for me. It was very old-fashioned. I felt like I had gone back, decades in time, but it was a fantastic experience to be there with the Vienna Philharmonic and the Vienna Ballet and all the huge balls that we had. It was it's just, like I said, very old-fashioned way of living. And I actually broke my hand in Denmark. I lifted an old elderly woman who who had a heart attack, and I broke my hand lifting her up. And that hand was, I had to play with a broken hand for almost a decade because people couldn't operate on it at the time. They were afraid that it would be worse, actually, just kind of the way that I broke it. So I invented this very strange technique where I only played with 4 fingers, or actually 3 fingers, because you don't play with the thumb on the violin. So I only played with 3 fingers. I didn't use the 4th finger. And then finally I couldn't really get anywhere with it, so I needed to have the operation. So I went back to Denmark, had surgery on the hand, and spent, I didn't play for 2 years, and one of those years I spent in rehab at Johns Hopkins University. And that was when I was at Ph.D. Conservatory in the U.S. And it could have been a really bad experience, but it turned out to be a great experience because the woman who worked with me suggested that I kind of log my experience with her and, how I felt and how everything was going, and as well as spending the time kind of mapping out what I would like to do in my future. So I ended up, mapping out the next 5 years what I wanted to do. I wanted to play Carnegie Hall. I wanted to play with this group and that group. I wanted to go here and there. And when I was done and I was, out of rehab, I started playing again. I did all those things. I went boom, boom, boom. I had it mapped out. I spent a whole year. I went twice a week to rehab, so I spent a lot of time with this woman. And it was a whole book pretty much for the next 5 years. So it was a very strange silver lining, let's put it that way.
It really was.
Yeah.
It's so amazing to me how you took this lemon of having a broken hand and made lemonade. And then you told me, if I remember correctly, please correct me if I'm not right, but even though you were not intimidated by this woman due to your past experiences, you actually ended up working for her at Peabody Conservatory in Baltimore. What was that experience like?
You mean my teacher from Eastman?
Yes.
I guess you mean, well, that was, I was intimidated by her. This was my teacher when I got my master's at Eastman. We were all intimidated by her. And so it was one of those things that was terrifying and also a huge challenge. I'm one who can never say no to a challenge. I just can't. I'm kind of drawn to challenges like a magnet. I'm not sure why, but so it was one of those things because it was challenging and it was difficult to be her assistant. I ended up working for her for 2 years, and it was, half of the time though I wasn't playing, but I was teaching her students. So it was. I learned a lot from that.
I love that you find the good in everything. That's so great. What was it like to be in physical therapy and still work on growing yourself? It must have hurt.
It was so painful, and that was why my this woman that I worked with, Joanne, she got sick and tired of hearing me. Just all I did was moan, basically. Oh no, it was ice and then hot and cold and hot, and I was sitting with all the sports athletes from Baltimore, and I was the only one who wasn't a football player or basketball player or something. I was the only non-sports person, and it was incredibly painful because she had to break my hand back out. I can't even explain it. I had to learn to reuse it, basically.
Yeah.
And that's why she said, this is not going to work for a whole year. Let's do something with this time. Take your mind off to distract you. And so that's what we did.
Well, that's really great because as a self-esteem counselor for much of my life, I love it when you wrote in our book that you believe that anyone can do it, and it's truly building self-esteem and hopefulness. You also said that success is difficult to achieve when you have not seen it, tasted, or felt it. What a great way to put it. And by doing a simple plan, one gets a feeling of success and accomplishment. Tell us more about the difference to how you felt early on in life, growing up, and how you now feel as an accomplished person.
Well, I really feel, because I did have difficulties early on, I do feel that if I can do it, everyone can do it. And I also feel that for myself, if you over there can do it, then I can do it. It isn't as unachievable or overwhelming as it looks. Everyone who has had great success had those bumps, as you can see from the people in your book, Dr. Joyce. Everyone had bumps. It's never been easy. There's no way. There's no one who's had fame or great success who's had an easy, route up there. There's no way. It just doesn't happen. So I feel like the most important thing is the hopefulness, and the hopefulness comes from support, really. Has either that you have had success and you know how that felt and you could do it, or that you can kind of see how, if you have a sort of view of that it can happen. And I feel that comes from who's in your life, who gives you support, who's there to guide you and be there for you when you're younger. That's where I feel it comes from. I'm amazed at the kids that I see who have no support and somehow manage to do well in school after all, when no one is there to say, good job or anything. That amazes me.
Well, it is true. I don't know, not quite sure why you have this within you, but I know many people that don't have any support, me being one of them, and went on to do great things. So you just because you have support doesn't mean that it's in your DNA to make something of yourself. And that's always frustrated me. And when I met you, I thought, wow, she really knows who she is. And not very many people go through life, you should give yourself credit for that, go through life actually feeling the way that you do now. And what a wonderful experience all this has brought you to.
Yes, you're right. I am very fortunate about that. Yeah, thank you for saying that. Mm-hmm.
Well, you deserve it. You moved to New York City to give a debut in Carnegie Hall, got a great review from the New York Times, played with an orchestra, and entered into Broadway. Wow, what a career. Tell us more about this.
Well, I moved to New York City, and I had, as you know, I had already mapped out those years in my little book from the rehab. And so it was actually easy. I called, it wasn't easy to do the things I did, but I knew exactly where I was going to begin with it. I had a plan, and I knew the people that I needed to contact. And so, the first thing I did was get a job at a paralegal thing. I worked in an office, and then I did my little debut in Carnegie Hall, and was lucky to get a good review, which helped tremendously, of course. And then I just started, contacting people. I just wouldn't let off. I just called the people who I wanted to play with and said, hey, I'm here. You can read about me in the paper, and I would like to come and play for you, and I'm really interested in playing for you or with your group or whatever. And, please give me a chance. And some people were completely disinterested and indifferent to this, and I had to call a couple more times or just kind of show up at the door, which I've done a couple of times too. And then there was a lot of luck as well, where I just happened to meet someone somewhere, and that helped as well. But, I have this firm belief that if a door closes, then another one opens. I do not care if people do not get back to me. There's always someone else who can help. I just don't care. The older I get, the more I feel this way. So if I want something, I'll figure out how to do it. It's just going to be a question of how I'm going to do it, not if I'm going to do it. Because people are replaceable. I'm replaceable. You are. Everyone is. So if somebody who I really want to play with doesn't want to take the time to hear me or meet me or play with me, then there's always somebody else. And that's kind of, my message.
Well, there's a saying for that. When I used to be in the modeling acting industry, I knew it took 25 auditions to get a part. And so you have to kind of go and go and go and be rejected and be rejected and be rejected.
Right.
But the word is that you have acquired and I have acquired is next. Somebody doesn't want you, fine. Go on to the next person. The word is next.
Yeah.
You just go on.
Yeah.
I just have to bring this up. You were talking to Elton John. You've worked with Aretha Franklin, James Taylor, Paul Simon, Aaron Neville, and Tammy Wynette, my favorite. I love her. You notice in talking with some stars that many seemed unhappy, spoiled, and difficult to work with. I would think these people would be on the moon. Why do you think this is?
I think it comes from what we spoke about earlier, that it's not healthy to have everything be about you. That's one thing, I mean, you lose completely perspective. I mean, not everyone is like this, of course, but this is just a very general way of describing something that I've seen a lot in my profession. You lose perspective because there isn't any. It's just all about your eyes, how it looks from you. And a lot of the people that I play with, the big stars, were catered to and had lost the way to just be in life, because they had like guards everywhere, and people were catering to them, and they couldn't really walk around in the street and have a normal life. And I think that's wonderful for a time, and then it's not so wonderful anymore. And there was a lot of alcohol and drugs and pressure.
Sure.
The pressure is on, and you're only as good as you are today. And so I just don't necessarily think it's a life that is something that we should be hoping to have. Like a lot of people we all want to be famous, but I'm not sure that it is something that should be.
Well, it's not all roses, I think I'm hearing. It's just not all roses and lace and all that stuff, because you can't get caught up in yourself. The one thing that I've always prided myself on, and I see it in you too, so it's amazing. You're an amazing person to not have lost perspective, because people will say to me, oh, it's an honor to be on your show, or it's an honor to meet you. Why? I don't understand that. I'm just a regular person, and I always know that when somebody acts a certain way, it's not about you, it's about them.
Yeah.
And so I never have lost respect from where I came from, which was nothing, and I never got encouragement, which I wanted. But I gave myself encouragement. I gave myself what I needed in order to move forward, and I think we all have to do that.
Right, correct. And the thing about the perspective is that, unfortunately, when this happens, the focus of the whole point of everything changes, and it takes it from the music, in my case, to the person, which is completely misplaced. And then you forget why you did it in the first place.
Right. Well, when someone is rejected, what advice would you give them to keep in mind so they can move on and leave the negative behind?
Well, it depends on what you're rejected for, but basically, again, I think that every single person on the planet gets rejected. And we can't take us that seriously. Basically, my advice is do not take yourself that seriously. You got rejected. Yes, so you get back up and try again somewhere else with somebody else, in a different way. Sometimes rejection is the most fantastic thing that can happen to you. I've seen it many times. I am so grateful for some of the things that I did not get to do, because much better things came up instead afterwards. That wouldn't have happened if I had gotten what I thought I wanted desperately.
But they were lessons. They were lessons, and that's my
either that
of life.
Maybe, yeah, right. Silver linings. This is what I call it.
Yeah, silver lining, and they were lessons, and you learned from them. So as if that wasn't enough that you do all of this stuff, you got another wave of inspiration and started a new career in hip-hop, and learned to appreciate the unique mix of the lyrical sound of the violin with the harder and more edgy feel of hip-hop. Tell us about the good and the bad of hip-hop, because so many people think it's bad.
Yeah, I think people, it has a bad rap, so to speak, so to say, because of the very many negative, messages that come from rappers here and there. I think rap is a fantastic platform for which to send a message. It is a really, really powerful platform that we have, and we can reach so many, especially young people, because they are the ones that will mostly listen to hip-hop. And if you can say something, if you can write a negative rap or have a negative message, you can also do exactly the opposite. And that's what I like. surround myself with rappers who are socially conscious and want to say something that's important and not just talk about partying and booze and sex. And, they have some things that they want to talk about. So.
Right. Well, I agree. They want to get a message out. And I think that sometimes the message, the people that I work with that do rap and do hip-hop, they're very into a cause like bullying in schools, things that people could identify with so much these days. So I think I like hip-hop myself, but I know a lot of people do have a negative vibe toward it for some reason.
Yeah. Well, I can understand that. They have, there are a lot of bad, really negative messages about violence against women and even children. I mean, even very, very famous rappers, when you listen to the words, it's not exactly, it's like, oh, why do you do that? It just kills me sometimes when you listen carefully. I mean, there was that whole case with Rick Ross, but about rape messages in his lyrics. But he's not the only one. I mean, there's so many who does that, especially about violence towards women. And I speak up about this stuff. When I hear it, I write to them. I tweet to them, and I send messages on Twitter. I just hate it. I really, really do. But
I think your self-confidence just amazes me. You're going to do it. Whatever you have to do, you're going to do. That's wonderful.
Yeah, it pains me a lot because, my kids listen to it too. My daughter who's 13, she listens to Rick Ross and stuff. So I wasn't very happy, with him. But like I said, he's not the only one. It's very common. And I think that now that Nike and all these people are will not, they drop them, now it has more awareness. That's a good thing for us. I'm happy about that. I think that's the right thing to do, because we have to be responsible, and I'm not saying, you always have to talk about roses and positive things, but just something, put some meaning into your lyrics, for God's sake. Have something that's meaningful and that means something to you. I mean, you can choose anything. There's so much in the world that you can talk about that is meaningful and that's powerful. So it's kind of that's just lame if you have to, put that kind of message into your rap lyrics that is glorifying, violence towards women or anyone for that matter. So.
Well, you're definitely preaching to the choir. I agree with everything you said. You are now in Cleveland playing pop, R&B, and hip-hop violin. What's next for you?
Oh, I'm not sure. I think what's next for me actually is, I'm not always looking to do new things, but I just want to dig deeper. That's what I'm thinking. I can feel it in me right now. It's like I know something is right around the corner. Just kind of digging deeper, doing something with more edge, or just I don't know exactly, but something is coming.
I knew that you were digging deeper, and I wanted to get that out of you, so I'm glad I did. You are a fascinating and beautiful woman who I admire so much for the perseverance you show in everything that you do. I'm sure others would like to know more about you. How could you be reached?
Well, everyone can find me on my website at irocktheviolin.com, and I'm also on Facebook at iRockTheViolin, and it's all I Rock the Violin, so it's pretty easy to find me. But basically, my website has all my content information, etc. So that's really the best place, and I will always post my latest tracks there. So that's the best place to find me.
And you do rock the violin. And
thank you. And they can find me in your book too, Dr. Joyce.
Well, I hope so. I hope so, because I didn't tell the whole story in this interview, so they'll have to get the book so they could read your whole story.
Exactly.
Well, it's been a pleasure speaking to such an inspirational person. Thank you so much for being on ImageMaker Media.
Oh, anytime. Thank you so much for having me. So appreciate it.
It was my pleasure.